All right, we are back. Thank you for joining us here on the Morning Prime. We continue with the conversation of pace, and of course, you're being derided on why you're picking calls while you're on air. Yeah, you know that's not TV etiquette.
Exactly.
In fact, all your phones should be off. Yes.
I don't bring my phones to church, to meetings, because I know the power of focus and concentration. That's why they speak lie, left, right, down. Now they know.
Now they know. We need to wind up the show. Still on this particular issue, the litmus test that we are talking about. Moving forward, how do you see this really panning out? Will we have maybe a reconstitution of a new PSS list? There's the issue of the CSS, of course, the CAS as well. Being contentious, is it unconstitutional?
I think we need to be stickler for law. It's very easy to balance inclusivity in this country. If you took 22 PSs from 22 communities,
yes,
you can take principal secretaries from the communities that did not produce the PS, because the law was not written for fun. It was written to be followed. And I think being a stickler for law is going to make us a more cohesive and a more safer society.
For me, from where I sit, I think that these issues are still being canvassed. And as Uongozi would say, perhaps we do not want to prejudge what is going to be out there. The truth is that issues will be canvassed around inclusivity, gender balance, regional balance, and those things. Will that make the appointor any wiser? Definitely. He will be hearing, the government will be hearing, and perhaps that may lead to one or two changes so that they can be able to comply.
Yes. Churchill, continue.
No, I want to say that the points that have been raised either in court or publicly are legitimate. We know the president is a tickler for rising up early. We want to encourage him also to be a stickler for the rule of law.
A stickler.
A stickler for the rule of law, because that rule of law starts with the Constitution. I've always seen the president encourage his appointees to serve everybody equally. He has a way of finding them in certain pockets of the country, but also has this expectation that after finding the money in certain pockets of the country, they are able to serve others equally. Yet we know that those cabinet secretaries, those principal secretaries, influence appointments that go down the government up to the lowest level. And everything, distribution of resources, the tendering system. There is always, shortlisting of suppliers. But who determines who supplies what? So it is a lie to appoint people in certain areas or from certain regions and tell them publicly for the gallery to hear that they will serve everybody equally. That does not happen in reality. We want His Excellency the President to serve all Kenyans equally, not just say it. We want to see it. And that seeing starts with the people that he appoints, whether they meet the requirements of the Constitution, Article 232. We want to believe that if all principal secretaries that have been there, were not good enough, there should be no other parameter on which a section of them were too good to be to remove. And they only happen to have one common denominator, and which is the ethnic identity. I think that is the wrong message. You are telling the others that the only reason they were not good is because they did not share in certain ethnic identity. And I think that is the wrong message that the president sent. I do not agree with whether that, let's let the government form. You are, in other words, telling the women to wait for Matumbo after the men have taken the stake. We want to see the women represented in the cabinet secretary slot. We want to see the women represented in the principal secretary, whatever the CS position, all the way down, so that it reflects across the board, not waiting, for the government to form. When it comes to forming the government, the government has been there for a shorter time. When it comes to Churchill recovering, August is too long ago. I have been a critic of governments. I've been a critic of governments from Moi's days. Kibaki's time, Uhuru's time, and now. I've been consistent. The only people who have not been consistent are these ones who never see anything wrong with any government in power. Egypt.
And you've paid for it.
And I've paid the price for it.
You've paid the price and being in
and
Yeti House.
no
as
wonder
well.
he's anti-reformers.
Whether you want to defend yourself.
Yes. If legitimacy is gained by Yati House, I was also there. It is only that some of us are rational.
But
But you're there as a lawyer.
No, I was there as a detainee. Not as a lawyer.
He went to see how they look like.
I went there immediately. The day Dr. Hook was buried. Then the following week, Monday, they came to my room, hall 5, University of Nairobi, and took me in and straight to your house. I've been standing up. It's only that I'm rational. I'm not just opposing. You have seen some of the activists, they have done a good job, but some they forget because it becomes a way of life, a habit. They say, what is here to oppose? Many times it becomes, show me what to oppose. So even when you tell them this is good, they say, no, not the good one, show me what to oppose. Now, I can't go there, I'm not professional, you know, and I cannot. So that may be the difference. Otherwise, I know the great man from Yakach stands for what is right, what is good, until matters become Baba. It is only when it comes to Baba that he will try to find stories. His families. But when it comes to others, he is very brutal.
When it comes to Ruto, it's brutal.
Very brutal. But when it comes to Baba, families, this politicized families, and you understand, because they can stone him in the streets. But let's come to the way forward. I think, one, if the president was to come up and on his own start slashing the list, that would paint his government in a very bad light. There are two positions, the position of cabinet secretary and principal secretary. Somehow the constitution allowed the president free hand. Why? Because he's the vision holder. Vision holder so that we take into account. There are things we want. There are things he has to do. And these things we say, we therefore give you a free hand to select your team and deliver. So if we force the man from Nyakach to be the cabinet secretary in charge of interior, and then he goes there, and every time the president suggests, can we call these people for a meeting? He says, hold on, that's not your role. Then, so there is that part.
He can order
I
the
think
chiefs
when
to
it
oppose
comes
the
to
government.
principal secretaries, as much as we are looking at budgetary constraints, as much as we are looking at the limitation, I think if there's need, the president can add a few more slots. There are departments that can be divided. Sometimes fiscal issues have to be considered, but we also weigh the national interest, the national cohesion. So that is why you say, okay, let's add this one and this, because there's a list of, I think, 500. So getting another one Ogiek from there, another lady from Coast, another one from Tiberias or wherever we call it, would be good. So if we added another 19 slots to make them 70, and this 19 you can use for various interests, but the country needs to move on. We need to move on. We need to move on.
Right. So even if we have at least 5 minutes to finalize, I think critically what has happened this week as well is the CDF, the NGCDF, and we have parliamentarians that they've made it very categorical. They're going to sabotage their supplementary budget if this is not seeing the light of day. And we want to just get clarity on the constitutionality of this CDF. And it seems they're hell-bent on making sure it's just steamrolled through Parliament at the end of the day. Let's do it with you, Martin.
The culture,
that is the whole debate.
The culture of disobedience, the culture of impunity is manifest in our public life. When the Supreme Court was making its findings, there is a point it made. It said that it cannot be the design of the Constitution that both the watchdogs, the parliamentarians who then are supposed to oversight government, are also implementers who also oversight a fund. That argument applies to the county assembly, it applies to the national assemblies. The point being that you, as a people's representative, you are the government watchdog and overseeing how monies are being used. You cannot be found by any other way to be also implementing a fund that only you are accountable for, because then what would be the flip side of it? It will be that now it's the Auditor General and the executive that now must check you in how you're using, when you are supposed to be checking government on its total expenditure. So the argument still holds. Whatever you do, however you play around with this thing, there is no role for implementation of whatever kind for a person who is elected as a people's representative doing legislation and oversighting government. So that argument will be the main argument whether you want to subvert government operations, whether you want to twist government and so on. So what they should be looking at is a way in which the executive can actually create some discretionary funds to allow for certain specific projects within their respective areas. Now, if that were to be done, the argument would be, do you want to do that at the county level or do you want to do it at the national level? Remember, the very essence of saying that national government fund to call CDF a national government, and the very things that they do, which are education, which is a national function, and then some of the things they do around water, around health, around roads.
It's pure duplication.
Duplication, but also some of those functions are devolved. So at the end of it, this kitty is unnecessary duplication and unnecessary entanglement of the National Assembly representatives into the business of implementation. They should not be in that space. Now, if you argue the law, argue the principles in the Constitution, and look at the basic structure of our constitutional provisions, it ousts them from implementation. Whatever they want to go around it, it can only be disobedience, and it will only be a defiance of the principle of separation of powers.
All right. So this is purely a defiance that we're seeing from them, that will go full steam ahead, will sabotage supplementary budget. So they're still hanging on the coattails of this was a previous constitution. Now we have the new constitution. This is what now is making the whole matter very cloudy.
They are in denial.
They're in denial.
They are in denial.
These are withdrawal symptoms.
Thank you, Debal. The person who is saying he will be sabotaging government, he will be doing that, about a decision of the Supreme Court, is the person who is supposed to make laws. Is the person who should be able to say, yes, CDF is good, and we agree CDF is good. And the Supreme Court did not declare CDF unconstitutional, illegal. The Supreme Court said the participation of MPs is the problem. Such that the MPs are supposed to find a formula where money flows and they are out of it. That can be one. Budgeting is done. Projects are set and sent from the constituency level and financed directly all through the counties. This thing, the MPs were supposed to make the law, bring in ideas. They are not doing it. Why? Because the stingy ones have been busted. The ones who are hiding under CDF, they will never give you a cup of tea. They will never donate anything. They are always, even if you go for them for help, yet they are having a lot of money, they will never give you. They hide behind CDF. Now they have been busted. There's no CDF. The stingy ones are very bitter. But the law, separation of powers, must continue. CDF should continue. That disbursement from the national government actually should go. What we should do, ensure these guys, ladies and gentlemen, who have been hiding under it, you find an MP behind a motorbike distributing checks And today we are distributing things which you can give a rider. Say, take this thing to Kadianga Primary, take this one to this primary. It is the MPs doing it. When they give some help, they are there. When they come to announce it, they come to launch it, they come to supervise. They are around these things. Yet they are the ones who should tell us, these people are using your money, but they have not done right. So the decision of the Supreme Court ought to be upheld. And nobody should threaten President Ruto to disobey. Let the MPs come up with a law that will not be declared unconstitutional. They are the ones who disburse the money. They are the ones who approve the budget. They are the ones who do this. So threatening is just posturing.
Thank you. Right.
Posturing.
Right. Professor, let's just take some 30 seconds to wind up. I know this is a huge topic. We'll discuss it next week.
I think I want to associate it fully. Dr. Loy explained it way too well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Churchill.
Yes, I think the MPs are in denial. The reality is that whatever name you call it, their role in the management of this fund will remain unconstitutional. It's not what it is called. I've seen they have attempted to entrench it in the Constitution. That alone may not be helpful. Because if you entrench it in the Constitution and the functions of Parliament remain as they are in the Constitution, separation of powers, oversight, legislation and representation, that will not be helpful. So they must come to the reality that as far as this matter is concerned, to the extent that none other than the apex court has pronounced itself on it, they must accept that,
Thank you.
It's off the mark for
Right.
them.
Dr. Martin Olo, finally.
Well, we have a country to serve, not for the country to serve us. We have a government to protect and to serve all our interests, but it takes our participation. So it's a two-way thing, and we must always, balance that responsibility and tension. It's not possible to meet in terms of the idealistic nature of some of our expectations, but we must be progressive in terms of how we want to be Kenyans, so that it's not everything that can be achieved in one day, and that we must also give ourselves room for time and therefore also for lessons to be learned.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, I really want to appreciate your input this morning. I think it was a very interesting discussion, and the humor today really got me. I really do appreciate it. I hope Kenyans are listening, especially also for the members of parliament, that yes, now that separation of power has to be clearly defined. The courts, they've made it very clear that they have a problem with the MPs overseeing this money. You came up with now the new law that you want to enshrine it, but still, you're the people who make this law. And also, if you make it bad, you should lie on it. Thank you very much for your valid company. Briefly, we'll be crossing over to Mombasa Road, where we shall continue with our coverage. News Diary, it's up next.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
For a stranger